Prepare to hear the truth from a real whistleblower and American patriot. Here's civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and indefinitely suspended FBI agent, Kyle Seraphin.
Welcome, my friends. Today on the Kyle Seraphin Show, we have a wonderful guest who agreed to come talk to us. I heard her story only in part while I was driving back from the SHOT Show in Vegas. And I told her I didn't want to hear any more until I heard it from her mouth. I didn't want it secondhand. So we're going to get the original reaction on this. There's no rehearsals and there's very little background. Her name is Amy Nelson. She's an attorney. She is a mother of 4 wonderful, very cute little girls, which we'll show you her Twitter page here. She's a wife and an entrepreneur, and she is also the host of the What's Her Story with Sam and Amy podcast, the founder of the Riveter company, which we'll also throw in the description below, so you guys can check out that link. And I want to welcome her right now, and we'll jump right into this thing with no further ado. Amy, welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so I grew up in Columbus, Ohio with a great family, and then went away to college when I was 18. I went to Emory University, studied international studies, and then went to law school at NYU. And I ended up working in New York as a commercial litigator for a number of years. And then eventually I met my husband, and we moved to Seattle together. He joined Amazon Web Services, which at the time was a little subsidiary of Amazon.com. And I kept lawyering until I became a mother. And then when I became a mother, I was really struggling in corporate America to kind of both see my daughter and work, which were 2 things I wanted to do. So I thought I would go out on my own as a lawyer, and started going to classes on how to write a business plan and do all those things, and figured out that women didn't really have support and community around starting businesses. So I built a business called the Riveter to do just that.
And this is based on Rosie the Riveter. Is that kind of where it's coming from?
It is. It's based on Rosie the Riveter, which was, a time when women were called to the workforce to support the American war efforts and really rose to the occasion. And so just to kind of pay homage to that, to those incredibly patriotic and amazing women.
For sure. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. I think there are obviously examples of the brick and mortar end. That was Walmart for a long time. Just steamrolled through, didn't care about litigation, didn't care about regulations. They could go through and make that happen. And obviously Amazon stepped into that space in a big way.
Yeah, and there's a name for it. They call it lawfare when you use the law as warfare. And I think that's an interesting way to describe it. I feel like our rights are politicized a lot, and they shift with the winds. Like if you look at 20 years ago, progressives, and Kyle, you know this, but I identified as a progressive my entire life.
we're gonna get into that in a second, because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, but progressives hated the FBI, right? In the post 9/11 era, it was it's just so against the FBI. And now progressives are just so pro FBI because they believe that the FBI is taking on something Trump that they don't like. Right. I always say to my friends who are progressive, like, you're so pro FBI right now. Do you remember 2016 when James Comey, came out 2 weeks before the election and caused chaos? Like I didn't really know anything about the FBI, and I've learned quite a lot over the past few years. So
I imagine so. All right. So just quick political background. You grew up in Ohio, and then you went to New York. New York's a pretty left-leaning place. Seattle, obviously very left as well. You're a registered Democrat, I assume, or you at least vote that way?
I mean, beyond that. So I was on Barack Obama's National Finance Committee. I worked on get out the vote efforts for Democrats, would be kind of in like the legal boiler rooms on election day for voter rights. Like I worked for Jimmy Carter, not as president. I'm not that old. I'm only 42.
Okay.
But,
I was going to say, we're the same age. So yeah.
He has an organization called the Carter Center that works on peace and democracy around the world. Yep. I worked for Jimmy Carter when I was 22, worked on elections in Ethiopia, Jamaica. I dedicated a large part of my life to this.
Would you say it goes as far as to say not just an advocate, but also like an activist in that realm?
I was a believer. I was a believer in democracy, I think is the best way to put it. I think we could get back to the place we were at as children, but I believe, and it's so hard to say all this because I feel like I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not. Like I believe that we really live in an oligarchy where corporations dictate the laws, dictate who's elected, dictate what politicians are focused on. And then the fallout is kind of we divide ourselves among these issues.
It's a right-wing boogeyman and it's a left-wing talking point, and 100%. they're both feeding into media frenzy on both sides.
100%, right? It's like if you look at like just the ink that is spilt, the time that is spilt on things that are distracting us from like making sure our kids are educated and fed. like, I understand in some ways why people go there. It's ludicrous. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But like, then they go on Twitter and they're like, the Twitter files, which are true. Like, was the public square, which is the internet, manipulated? For sure.
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you help people feed into those conspiracies.
Well, moreover, they're looking for that unifying thread. When I always tell people is that petty corruption usually is a bunch of people doing the same sort of things, but not because they're coordinated, just because they're lousy people and they have low ethics and low morals. All right. So let's get into your story. How far back do you want to go? And you can tell me the beginning, because I'm sure you're the expert at where to start.
Well, I think like a reasonable place to start is April 2nd, 2020, 2 weeks into the pandemic. My husband and I are in Seattle. We have our 4 little girls. The baby was, I think, 8 months then. She's little. Our oldest was 5. My husband had worked at Amazon Web Services, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, that it's where the internet lives. So the internet lives in these big data warehouses that exist on this planet, not in the cloud. And my husband worked in real estate, and he helped scout real estate locations that would be okay for data centers, and helped work when Amazon built them themselves, would help build them. My husband had been working on the Amazon's Jedi bid for their $10 billion cloud contract.
You want to tell people a little bit about what that is, because I think that's very relevant.
Yeah. So I didn't really know this about Amazon, but so Amazon, we all think Amazon.com, where we buy all of our things on the internet, is like the big money maker and why Amazon is so successful. It's not. Actually, their retail business is a money loser. However, their cloud business, where they sell internet space, is where they make all of their money. Amazon stores the data for the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, and various other government agencies.
And DOD, Amazon, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah, and DOD. And Amazon makes massive profit, billions of dollars from the government. And in fact, like, if you look at Amazon's stock, in 2013, Amazon Web Services won a $600 million CIA contract, and that forever changed the trajectory of Jeff Bezos' life and company. Amazon stock started going up and up and up and up for the next 7 years because of that CIA contract. Real estate development is big risk, big money. It's a big thing. I'm so proud of him. He's happy. So we're 2 weeks into the pandemic. And then on April 2nd, 2020, at about 6:40 a.m., there was a knock at our door. So I go to the front door and I'm like, who is at the door? And I have the baby on my hip, just in her diaper. But I'm like, did something happen overnight? Like, is this the health authorities? Like, is it the apocalypse? What is going on?
It's not good when the FBI is at your door.
No, it's never good.
So when you did you hear them bang and do an FBI search warrant, or what were they saying?
So they were not there for a search warrant.
Okay.
Not this time, but Kyle, they came again. Okay, no, but not this time.
Yeah, I read that in.
Yeah. So I motioned through the door, like I shrugged my shoulders because I didn't feel like opening the door in the pandemic. And there was a woman and a man. They didn't have on their FBI jackets.
Right.
Just normally, they did not have masks on. And the woman took out her badge and it said FBI. And I was like, is this Carlton Nelson's house? I'm like, yes, I'm his wife. And they're like, we'd like to speak to him. So I'm like, okay. So I call Carl down. He comes down. He was awake, but he was upstairs. And I'm like, the FBI is at the door. And then I look at him, and I think many people would be terrified to do this, but I'm a lawyer, and like, there's nothing wrong with saying this. And I looked at my husband and I said, you cannot talk to these people without a lawyer.
Everybody talks to us. I don't know why that is.
Well,
it's uncanny. I know why.
I think you're panicked. I think Americans feel like if they ask for a lawyer, they're saying they did something wrong.
Correct.
Do you know, they asked if they knew this real estate developer named Brian Watson. My husband's like, I do know him. And they go, we're going to stop you right here. This is your chance. We know everything. And my husband's like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So we're going to stop here and I will call a lawyer. They said, we're going to hand you a few pieces of paper. And then they left. And, we opened the pieces of paper. One was a letter telling him that he was the target of a federal investigation in the Eastern District of Virginia. We are in Seattle. The Eastern District of Virginia is 3,500 miles away. Yes,
that's my old district.
And it is. The Eastern District of Virginia is where the government goes to prosecute Edward Snowden.
There's really 2 or 3 soft seats for government prosecution. One is the Southern District of New York. The other one's going to be the District of DC. And then lastly, it's Eastern District of Virginia.
So that was the first letter telling him he was the target of a federal investigation. And then the second one was a letter that said, we intend to seize these bank accounts. And it listed like 3 bank accounts. And I'm like, what the hell is happening?
Right. And they said they were going to seize them under civil asset forfeiture proceedings.
Yeah,
Is that what
yeah.
Okay.
My husband was not charged with a crime. In fact, and it's important. My husband has never been charged with a crime. This was 2020. It's 2023. My husband's never been charged with a crime.
Yes.
So I say they're going to seize these. And I'm just like, I will admit, and I'm so disappointed in myself, but this for me started 3 weeks of like shock and panic, because
yes,
I think I knew enough about the legal system to know that this was bad. Then it wasn't something we could resolve easily. Right. And the letter said that that he was a target of a federal investigation in the Eastern District of Virginia related to allegations of private sector honest services fraud. And I'm like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, say that one more time.
Private sector honest services fraud. It is a federal crime of depriving your private sector employer of your honest services. In my obsessive research over the many years, I learned that the Eastern District of Virginia prosecutors hadn't prosecuted this since 2001.
Well, so what we're also saying too is that is the new game. The game is, it doesn't matter whether it's charges of 1001, which is the lying or false statements.
My husband needs a lawyer. So I'm shaking. And also do I need to tell my board for the Riveter? And we decided I needed to call my board for the Riveter right away, tell them this was happening.
Yep.
Get my husband a lawyer. And then the next part of our life began. We didn't really understand what my husband was even accused of, because when you say private sector honest services fraud, it's kind of vague and ambiguous. That my husband was accused of taking kickbacks on real estate deals. So essentially, the government said that he steered Amazon real estate deals to a developer in exchange for kickbacks.
Got it.
That did not happen, and I can explain what my husband did do. But what was very clear was that there wasn't a conversation. My husband was being accused of a crime. There was no what happened, what didn't happen. The FBI actually executed a national operation that day on April 2nd, 2 weeks into the pandemic, for Amazon. That it was actually Amazon that had accused my husband of a crime. It was Amazon who hired a former federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia and paid him millions of dollars to lobby his former colleagues. His name is Patrick Stokes. He works at Gibson Dunn. He directly called up the then U.S. Attorney, Zachary Terwilliger, set up a meeting. Before the first meeting, Pat Stokes sent the DOJ an email saying our first priority is asset restraint and recovery. Went in, pitched you pitch a crime, like in a 20 slide deck PDF. They pitched a crime.
Mm-hmm. That on its face that feels very corrupt from the positions when I used to work crimes, because that's not the way that we would get them.
Do you want to know something?
I do.
It's shocking. And again, I have to emphasize, we knew none of this in 2020.
Right.
This was slowly pieced together in 2021 and 2022 after a lot of work in figuring things out. But the night before Amazon's lawyers met with DOJ, they officially broke a contract with the real estate developer, Brian Watson. And per the terms of the contract, the only way that they could break the contract is if Brian Watson, the real estate developer, was found guilty or pled guilty to a felony crime.
That there's probably millions, or is it billions of dollars?
Over $100 million in damages.
Okay, so $100 million in play, and the way that they can get out of this contract is that there has to be the people that are involved in it have to plead guilty to a felony, and it shows, and that obviously is going to be bad faith negotiations, and that's how they're going to walk away from it.
Amazon alleges no financial harm.
Got it. They didn't lose anything. They just were trying to.
They gained.
Wow.
Hey folks, I'm Kyle Seraphin, host of the Kyle Seraphin Show, and what you've been watching is a set of cuts from an interview that I did with Amy Nelson. If you found this interesting, I would encourage you to go to our Rumble channel and watch the full unedited interview and her whole story. You've got the basics of it right there. This is hands down the most emotional interview that I ever did with anybody, and I was a paramedic in the civilian world, and I was an FBI agent working for over 6 years. I've sat down with people who were the victims of sexual assault. I've dealt with people whose family members committed suicide. This was the most personally impactful interview that I've ever done in 41 years of being on this planet. I cannot watch it without tearing up. It upsets me, and I think that you'll see that in this interview every one of my close buddies who work with us here at the Kyle Seraphin Show, who've been watching it and keeping track of all of our interviews, believe that this is the most impactful thing that we did. So I'd encourage you to go over there, check out our Rumble channel. You won't be disappointed. It is really a powerful story, and it shows the incredible wrongdoing that our federal government is engaged in right now. We have referred Amy's story to the House Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, the subcommittee that Jim Jordan's people are taking care of. We are hopeful that they take up her story as a great example of how bad our government can be when it chooses to be bad. Thank you so much for watching our show. We do appreciate it. And like I said, feel free to check it out. You can also find it on our Podbean if you just want the audio. It's equally moving. I think the tone of voice is still strong. So thanks so much for considering.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show. Be sure to follow him on Twitter and Truth @Kyle Seraphin.